Hello, I'm Father Norm Douglas, Executive Director of Heart to Heart Communications. Welcome to this edition of Spirit at Work, a program in which we interview people about their lives, what matters to them, what their core values are, and especially how they connect their spirituality with their daily work. Here with me is the co-founder of Heart to Heart. He's an attorney, and I like to call him Larry the Lawyer, Larry Vuillemin.
Hello. And I know you may think that a lawyer and a priest talking about spirituality in the workplace might be the beginning of a good joke. But years ago, Norm and I got together and explored the question, how do you practically connect faith, values, ethics with the work that you do, with everyday life? We'll be right back with our guest to explore that further.
Welcome to this edition of Spirit at Work. Today, our guest is Phil LoCasio, Director of Operations at National Aviation in Tempe, Arizona. Good to have you here, Phil.
Great to be here. Always good to be with you two guys.
Well, you know, I know that you're a native of Akron and grew up in North Hill. Want to hear a little bit more about your background, because it's always interesting to see what shapes people in their young years in terms of who they are today. And how would you respond to that?
I'd say first, primarily my parents. You know, my mother is solid as a rock, and my dad was a hardworking guy, and he wanted us to have a trade. He wanted us to learn a skill. Sports were always very important, and he sent us to a trade school, the old Howard High.
Okay.
So that was a very important part of my background in my life, but also the greater North Hill community of people. You know, you're affected by all these people. They care about you, and they look after you. They want you to do well, and they check up on you. And so I had a lot of aunts and uncles and relatives and friends that held me accountable to try to do well. You know, you know how that goes in a community like North Hill.
Yes, yes.
Well, so while you're on family, how about your own family? Children, grandchildren? I know you're in town visiting with family as well.
I have 4 children, Allie, Paul, Maria, and Vince, and they're all doing really well. Great son and daughters-in-laws, and 8 grandchildren. And actually my son lives in Arizona, and I have my youngest daughter who's moving to Arizona very shortly. So then I've got half the family here and half down there. So we make all our vacations are to Akron, Ohio. So.
How does a graduate of Old Howard High School in Akron, Ohio, end up as a director of operations of National Aviation down in it is down in Tempe, Arizona?
Yeah. Well, I've been very blessed. Actually, I worked at Goodyear. I got great training there, and then I taught high school for 4 years. And I went to work for a national machine company, Pete Pelia and the Pelia family, 33 years ago, and have worked for them in a variety of appointments and job titles and responsibilities. And then 16, 17 years ago, because of some health problems, some asthma, I moved to Arizona. And the operation there has really grown and been very successful. And I ended up in operations simply because we had a growing business, and I have a good mechanical, technical background, so that's how it happens.
And question, from that mechanical, technical background, that know-how and everything, to go into a leadership position, were there any particular adjustments there, or your own take on your call to leadership from someone who was basically focused on your own particular work to leading others?
Yeah, I think that really starts with taking real personal responsibility to see the company do well. That every project and everything you're involved with, you want to go well. So you take some personal responsibility to have some drive to succeed, but then to care about people, the people you work with, that it really happens with them. And so it's always a team environment. I've never been a kind of a top-down leader that dictates what people do. I've always tried to invite them, you know, to to work with me, and kind of like the old football. I mean, it's a team sport. It really is, and that's what management is, I think. It has been for me. So.
Yeah. If I may, you're also in town, not just visiting with family here, but you're celebrating an anniversary, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Will you tell our audience about that, please?
Yeah, it's very, very fortunate and blessed to be celebrating my 25th anniversary of ordination as a deacon. I went to the seminary in Cleveland and was ordained in 1986, and really fortunate to meet these two guys in that process. That Father Norm came to St. Martha, I think a year before I was ordained, and then on my Mass of Thanksgiving, one of the great days of my life, I met Larry Vuillemin. So I've been blessed. It's been a good ride.
I was just going to follow up, if I may, here again. A deacon might mean different things to different folks out there in their own faith communities. In the Catholic Christian community, what does it mean to be a deacon?
Really, it means to be a servant. That's what it means. And it means providing your gifts, your energy, your labor to serve God and our fellow man in whatever way you're called. I at the altar as a deacon to help the priest during liturgy, to preach by teaching and reading the gospel and giving homilies, sacramentally by doing baptisms and weddings and funerals and things like that. But maybe the most important thing is to be engaged in the life of people, that need help, that where you can maybe be a little of the face of Christ, maybe, or certainly see the face of Christ in them, and try to do some good. Try to lift people up. And I work with St. Vincent de Paul, and guys in my class do prison ministry and all kinds of different things in the community. So that's it.
Yeah, well, here, question. Mechanical technical ability, focused on that, trade school deacon. What was the leap? What was the spiritual connection? Or even, were you always into your faith and your religion? Did this kind of evolve? How did you get to that point where even feeling called to the diaconate?
One of those epiphany moments, I guess, when my daughter Allie was baptized, I stood up at St. Martha Parish and I did a profession of faith, like you have to do as a parent of a baby that's being baptized. And that profession of faith made me question my faith. I wasn't going to church at the time. I was kind of a product of the late 60s, and I had issues with everybody, all institutions, but I went home and I read the Bible from cover to cover over a few months, secretly. Didn't want anyone to know I was reading the Bible. And when I did, I came back to St. Martha Parish. And the night I came there, they were having a community a night where they invited people to speak, members of different groups from organizations in the parish. And what really hit me was an old fella who spoke about St. Vincent de Paul. And, these two people running St. Vincent de Paul couldn't even drive. And they were getting people to drive them to take food to the poor, So now the gospel made sense to me. And I was powerfully moved by that and thought that would be a worthy life to just be able to serve like they were doing. Like that would make someone's life valuable and complete and worthwhile. And it just had a tremendous impact on me. So I started getting involved at St. Martha Parish, and before long I was real involved. And then I had never met a deacon, and I heard a priest mention it. And so I inquired with the diocese. And actually when I inquired, the first year they said I was too late for the inquiry, right back next year. Of course I said, are you kidding me? And then the next year I did apply. They sent me a one-sentence letter that said, you're too young, And again, I said, are you kidding me? And then I felt the call, kept the interest, and applied again the third year, and then I was accepted into the program. And
That's good.
such a desire to learn more, to grow more, to stay close to something that's really good, something in the world that is good.
Yeah, yes. Maybe you just answered my question, but when you mentioned you felt the call, there might be people out there that are experiencing some sense. Or what do you mean when you say you felt the call? How could you articulate that?
It's a great question, because very few of us ever hear voices in our head that are clear, like maybe Moses did at the burning bush. But, I think it's a clear movement towards something good and true in your life. When something feels right, and I'm reading and I'm studying, and each thing that I did that moved me closer to God and closer to this life of service, I always heard and felt a yes, an affirmation. And so I just continued to be faithful to that, wherever that would take me. And I still, it's a lifelong struggle, I still pray to God, what do you want me to do? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough? Am I doing the good things? Is there something else that I think it's a lifelong prayer that we say that, says, Lord, what do you want me to do? It's what everybody has said through the Bible, right? Not that would relate myself to any of those guys, but all the great people of the past have still always said, Lord, what should I be doing? And I think that's the question that we should be asking.
We have about another 30 seconds for this segment. Just today, if somebody were saying, gosh, what would help me to hear God's call in my life? Since we just have a moment, just one little tip that you might give to somebody to say, how do I hear God's call?
I think you hear it in prayer. I think you read a little scripture, you pray, and then you're quiet. And you got to let God speak to you.
Yes.
I mean, that's...
Well, hey, thanks, Phil. We'll have you back for the next segment in a few moments.
All right, great.
Welcome back to this segment of Spirit at Work with our guest, Phil LoCasio, who is Director of Operations at National Aviation in Tempe, Arizona. And we've been having a great conversation. Hopefully you've been part of it. And I'm going to ask our attorney, good lawyer, Larry, to ask the opening question on this segment.
Phil, when you were pursuing the diaconate, that's quite a commitment for you and your family, and added together with all these other leadership responsibilities and everything else. How were you able to juggle all of that?
Well, I don't think I juggled it very well all the time. My wife, Cindy, really has been the best thing to happen to me in my life, bar none. And she's helped me, really. We struggled with it, because all through diaconate training in Cleveland, they'd say, family first, work second, and ministry third. But it's really difficult to do. It is, because sometimes you're visiting somebody who's really in trouble, and you think you can help them, or they're asking you for help, and so you might shortchange your family, and I did. I know I did. But thankfully, Cindy always called me back to reality. She would remind me. She didn't do ministry with me, but she'd always say a prayer for me when I left to do something. But she'd always remind me, to be grounded in my family and in my job, and so it's really a struggle. There's no easy way to do it, But I've been blessed. I think that I've gotten through raising our children because I had a good wife who helped me, who really did it, and that's the best answer I can give. So.
That's a good answer. I'm sure all the wives out there like hearing it too.
It's true.
It's important
it's
for husbands
true.
and wives to be supportive of each other. My question, working at National Aviation, Spirituality, I know that as a deacon it's expressed, you visit the sick, you preach on Sunday, but how is spirituality expressed or lived in a company like that, in your position for yourself and for others?
Well, I think first of all to recognize that we all have spirituality, everyone. It doesn't matter whether they go to church or not, or whether they belong to a Catholic church or Protestant or Buddhist. So to recognize that first and foremost, that we treat everybody with dignity and respect, and we honor who they are, because they too, have a connection, a voice with God. And, but getting back to my job, I pray every morning. In fact, in my office, I start every morning with prayer and pray for a bunch of people, and I say, Lord, help me through this day. Help me through this day. Help me to do some good, to honor you in some way, to be maybe competitive, but also, sensitive, and to get the job done and be tough in doing that, make sure it happens, because succeeding in business also helps to care for people, it helps to take care of people. The Pelia family and the business has provided jobs for people for 40-some years, and I consider that to be God's work too, and then just to live out that faith by the way you treat people, right? We talk about leadership, and we talk about human behavior, like trying to be honest, trying to care for people when they're having a bad day, instead of being just technical, care for those people who really make the business, the people doing the work. They make the business succeed, and showing them some concern, and that we try to show that we care for them, because we really do. They make it happen. So I don't know, I don't preach to anybody at work, but over the years, I've been asked questions and about faith, and there's been opportunities to share a little bit of that with people. But I think leading by example really is the most important thing for us to do.
Amen.
It's if you don't do that, you don't have anything. Your words don't have any meaning anyway. So,
thanks.
Phil, how do you, in the workplace, practically connect? And for you, you've already mentioned it's living out the gospel. How do you practically connect that as a leader in the workplace with a workforce that I know is culturally diverse and also come from any number of spiritual traditions?
That's a great question, because it's not something that we used to talk about at all, ever. But I think as we learn more and more about what makes businesses succeed and what motivates people and helps people at every level of the business get energized and empowered and buy into the mission, the vision, is our role is like a servant leader. It really is, which would come right out of the gospel. It's to care for other people more than yourself. Everybody knows if you're an arrogant, selfish jerk, okay? Everybody knows if you're that way. But if you practice, what we preach, it's good business sense. For example, if we care for the people, we really do that, and they know that we do, they will give back. They will work. They'll take ownership for what they're doing. They'll take pride in their quality. They'll want the company to succeed. They'll feel very much part of it. And so when you look at the gospel values that we really hold so dear, love, charity, sacrifice, healing, forgiveness, those things all come to play. We have employees that have been given second and third chances, and they've blossomed, So redemption is a big theme for all of us, really. If you don't ever give everybody a second chance, our companies would be, you'd have all this high turnover, and you wouldn't have people who have a stake in the mission that we have. So I see a lot of connection. I think it's all right there, really. Yeah. You need technical competence, but you really need people who are driven and motivated because they care for each other, and because they want to succeed, and because they care for this company that they're a part of. So,
You have obviously a strong sense of purpose to your life. I'm sure you meet other people, whether there or in your work as a deacon, who say, well, I don't have much of a purpose to my life. Yeah, I work down the street at that company and work in a machine, or I drive a taxi cab, or whatever. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a teacher. Purpose for me, gosh, I don't know that I make that much of a difference. How would you respond to somebody like that maybe just feels their life doesn't have that great a purpose?
That's a great question, because I think we all struggle with that, and I don't know, I'm sure you guys do at times. You wonder, what is the value of my life? What am I contributing? I think as we get older too, especially, what legacy am I leaving? What value does this have? And at times it doesn't seem like there is any, because sometimes it's just like hauling stuff day to day after day, but we do because of the human interaction. For example, my company actually builds a product that helps inflate escape slides that saves lives, and we publicize that. So everybody in the workplace does something that contributes to society in some practical way. Like maybe you're making a bolt for a tire on a car that carries people, back and forth to work and to the hospital. And so in a practical sense, I think we all provide value to the world we live in, even though we don't sometimes see it in the bigger picture. But I think on a human level, we make a huge difference. I mean, the people that made a difference in my life, when I was teaching school, there were people who just said one word or kind of witnessed to me at a time when I was down. I made a huge impact. Maybe they'll never know it, and I just see that happening all the time. When people share their stories, it isn't always the priest or the minister from the pulpit that changes their life. It's the people they work with who says something like, hey, man, hang in there, or hey, you're going to be all right, And those are the things that somebody looks back and says, gosh, my life turned around, and those stories, we tend to not give ourselves enough credit for just being good, caring people. And that, I think that's what Jesus would really just ask us to do where we live, care for one another. So.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you see it within your role as a director of operations to concentrate on the personal and spiritual development of the people who work there at National Aviation, and to do that appropriately? Do you see that as part of the role? And if so, how does that benefit business in a practical way?
Well, I don't put that in my job description, to spiritually improve the life or even the faith of the employees. But as I said earlier, I think there's absolutely a powerful connection. The people who work for me, I think I try to nurture their spirituality by example, by showing them that it's good to care for people, by reinforcing those characteristics that help them listen better, care for people, be more attentive to what's going on in people's lives. Now, without God talk, I think acknowledging that there is a higher power, I do it that way. So.
Well, hey, thank you. This conversation could go on. There's so much more we could talk about. We're glad to have you here, and join us as Larry and I have a brief closing segment reflecting on this conversation. Welcome back to our closing segment of Spirit at Work, as Larry and I share briefly some of our reflections based on our conversation with Phil LoCasio. Larry, one thing that struck me was that he talked about how in his workplace, unlike his diaconate at church, he's not going to be a preacher there. He's not going to try to teach, these are certain faith values you ought to have. And yet the point he made, and it resonated throughout his whole presentation, conversation with us, was that the example we set, we model the way. And I could see that even in Phil's sharing. I mean, you could see how he smiles, he lights up, he has a passion for who he is and what he does and how he connects that Spirit of God with how he cares about the people at work, even using the word redemption to talk about how that happens not just at church but in the workplace.
Yeah, and I picked up on that myself. You know, our lives are stories of redemption. You know, that word redemption goes well beyond just dull, drab dogma, as the late Karl Rahner used to say. It's really a matter of who we are and what we're going through. I think we all are experiencing redemption in our lives. In fact, I met Phil 25 years ago when I was going through a redemption story myself. It wasn't anything he said necessarily, but just seeing the person that he was and how he exemplified faith at work. That spoke to me pretty powerfully, and I'm so glad to be his friend today, and I very much appreciate the person who he is. You know, for Phil, the spiritual journey isn't just some weekend add-on. It's exactly who he is every day and who he tries to be.
Yes, and reminds us all that hopefully we can all live out that redemption story, knowing how God isn't done with any of us yet.